Evening, everyone, and welcome to our Power Podcast All-Star Live Stream Series. I'm your co-host slash moderator, Brother Bedford, and once again, we want to thank you for sharing with us your most valuable resource, your most valuable asset, and that is your time. You don't get a chance to do a do-over. So when you take time out of your life to spend it with us, we hope and pray that we're doing our part and giving you value, something that you can use, something of substance that you can take to build your life, your family life. And of course, we talk a lot about business and money. So we want you to make sure that you're getting the right information to take care of that as well. We got something very special for you tonight. I'm extremely excited about tonight. This is one of those topics that is very near and dear to my heart. So I just can't wait for us to get started. So what I need you to do to let everyone know that we're live and in living color with Dr. George C. Fraser and Dr. David Whitaker. So go ahead and hit that share button right now. Let them know to get on over here. We only got an hour and we have some very valuable information to share. So go ahead and hit that share button, put it on your page, put it in your Facebook groups, and let them know that we're live and in living color with Dr. George C. Fraser right now. The next thing that I need you to do is go ahead and type in your name and where you're from. We've had brothers and sisters from all over the world chiming in, sharing their experiences, loving the information all the way from South Africa, all the way up in Canada, from the East Coast to the West Coast, from the North to the South. Brothers and sisters are joining us and they're staying with us and they're thoroughly enjoying the content. So go ahead and let us know where you're from. And also, here's something a little extra. Also put your business in there. We want to know what you do. So let us know what you do. So your name, where you're from, and the type of business you're in. Go ahead and type that in the comment section right now. The next thing that I need you to do is go ahead and follow Dr. George C. Fraser's fan page. That way, when you click that button, follow, you love it, and then you follow. Once you do that, you'll get notified of all of the upcoming shows, as well as all of the provocative ideas, thought-provoking ideas that Dr. George C. Fraser shares with us on a daily basis. And so you don't want to miss out on that. So go ahead and follow it, and you'll get notified. You can also go to www.newblackpower.com. And when you enter your name and email, then I can let you know about all of the episodes that's coming up because you don't want to miss any. I mean, they're just so rich, so full of information, knowledge, wisdom, things that can help you to edify your life and really help you to navigate through what we all have come to know as a very trying and difficult time, not an end time, right? There's going to be a time when we come out of this, but this is the time to prepare to get better for the other side of COVID-19, as well as all of the protests. We know we have some justice issues that we're talking about, and that kind of dovetails into tonight as well. There's some things that we need to talk about with us and our people and getting prepared for life in general. So that's why I'm extremely excited about tonight. Now, by now, you should know who the host of this podcast is. If not, shame on you. Shame on you if you don't know that the host is Dr. George C. Fraser, 6-time best-selling author on the subject of networking and building effective relationships, 6-time best-selling author on this subject. He's been featured on over 7 national magazines. Upscale called him Black America's #1 power broker, Black Power Broker. He was on the cover of Black Enterprise as Black America's #1 networker. He's been featured in I don't know how many newspapers. He's been quoted all over the place in CNN, Wall Street Journal, you name it. He's been quoted in those business periodicals, as well as Forbes magazine named the conference that Dr. George C. Fraser founded, the Power Networking Conference, is one of the top 5 conferences not to be missed. Now, everybody associates Forbes magazine, and they say they know what they're talking about when it comes to money and success. So Power Networking Conference was selected as one of the 5 conferences not to miss by Forbes magazine. Dr. George C. Fraser has received the 2016 Lifetime Achievement Award, Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award from Barack Hussein Obama. And I'm sure we're going to talk about this tonight, he's helped to charter 2 schools, which we're going to talk about tonight. So I don't want to go too far in that line, but this is all of the stuff that Dr. George C. Fraser has done. And so I'm getting ready to turn you over into the hands of our host for the evening, Dr. George C. Fraser. I just want to share one thought with you with Dr. Fraser and Dr. David Whitaker. I was watching a movie last night, and the lead character was a Jewish man. and he was all over the place. I mean, this movie was very hectic, very noisy, very busy, and he was all over the place. His life was full of stress and anxiety. But yet, at a particular point in the movie, he took the time to go to a bar mitzvah. One of the other things that happened is that at this bar mitzvah was his adversary, the person in the movie who was trying to kill him, that he owed money to. They were both at the bar mitzvah. So here's the point that I'm making, is that in the Jewish community, they know how important the rites of passage are. So they put down everything, the battles and everything, to come together to make sure that their children went through the rites of passage to become productive human beings in society. So I think that is one of the most powerful things that lead to what we're talking about tonight, is the rites of passage for us as a people. Will we put down everything else? Will we put down our conflicts to make sure that our children get the proper tutelage in going to the next steps and the next phases of their lives? And so without further ado, to take us further into this powerful conversation tonight, Dr. George C. Fraser.
Good to see you, Brother Bedford.
Thank you, Doc.
This is a special night for me. And oh, by the way, Brother Bedford, that movie is off the chain, Uncut Diamonds.
Yes, yes, yes.
With Adam Sandler.
Yes.
Unbelievable, brothers and sisters. You got to see this movie. It's about the New York City Jewish Diamond Center and all of the stuff that goes on. But there are lots and lots. It's entertaining and lots of lessons for us in this movie. And Brother Bedford talked about one of them. But let me get back to my point. This is a very special night for me because the person that we'll be talking to tonight, aside from my wife and obviously my children, this gentleman, Dr. David Whitaker, may be the most important person in my life. That's not an exaggeration. I've been knowing him almost a half a century. We were kids together. We grew up, in a sense, together. The interesting thing about David Whitaker, and you'll see how he comports himself, you see how he talks, you'll see his breadth and depth of knowledge. He's the quintessential elder. But Dr. Whitaker was exactly like this 50 years ago. He was an elder when he was in his 20s in terms of his knowledge and the way he comported himself. He's an incredible human being, an ally, a coach for me, has been for 50 years. You can't even imagine having a brother like this to the right of you for 50 years of your life. So between him and Donald Williams, Corky we call him, and Dr. Whitaker, really it's the reason I am the way that I am. I say that also because it was through Dr. Whitaker that I was convinced to go through an adult rites of passage program. Me and my late partner, Greg Williams, we went through it together. It was a totally new experience, and that experience changed my life. So much so that if you read Success Runs in Our Race, I talk about that experience and how transformational it was in my life. And I'm not saying it because he's sitting here and because we're going to talk with him tonight. I'm saying it because it was. You're going to learn about that tonight. I want to give him a full-blown, proper introduction. He is also, and it's in his introduction, an installed chief in the village of Antaqua in the city of Elmina, Ghana. He is wearing one of the traditional, let's call them robes, that one wears as an installed chief, but he's so much more than that. You'll find that out as we go about interviewing. So let me just give him a full-blown, because you need some context here, because we're sort of coming at you cold with something like this. And I actually don't know of a Zoom call that I've ever seen promoted where we are actually talking to an installed chief and one of the leading authorities on African rites of passage programs in the United States, if not in the world. So this may be a first for all of you. Dr. Kwa David Whitaker, Esquire, also known as Nana Kra Huima II, born 9 a.m. Thursday, November the 18th, 1943, is a dedicated father, teacher, cultural advocate, and Akan chief. In 1980, he simultaneously received his Doctor of Philosophy degree from Case Western Reserve University with a specialization in educational psychology and his Juris Doctorate degree from Cleveland Marshall Law School. So he is also a practicing attorney and a practicing family psychologist. And he was our family psychologist from the moment Nora Jean and I got married 47 years ago. Nana Whitaker has been a career educator and a cultural advocate for over 4 decades in his unrelenting quest to aid the development of urban students, families, and communities. He is also a race man, no question about that. Nana Whitaker has served as a high school mathematics teacher, a graduate school program coordinator, a school board member, and co-counsel in numerous desegregation cases. He maintained a small family therapy and legal practice until the late 1990s. His 30-year-old rites of passage transformation process for 25 to 30 Kent State University freshmen is the recipient of an Innovative Programming Award, and the sister program is in its 10th year in West Virginia University. Since 2004, Nana Whitaker has been involved with his daughters and colleagues in the development and operation of several rights-based urban charter schools that have received favorable state reports and continue to show promise for urban students. I am proud to say that I was there with him. We worked hand in hand to help start and to build an African-centered charter school. I'm just trying to pick up where I was. As part of his Akan chieftaincy and as chair of the board of trustees for the Atankwa Development Company, Nana Whitaker has made over 50 research and development trips to Ghana to oversee development projects and expand his knowledge base of rites of passage, concepts, principles, practices that form the educational foundation of the urban charter schools. Nana is confident that the behaviors, attitudes, and learning curves for urban students will show dramatic improvement when given the opportunity to experience the full benefit of the African cultural spiritual principles that enabled African ancestors in laying the foundation for civilization. That's not hype, that's anthropological and biological fact. Nana Whitaker has also written Rites of Passage, A Journey of Transformation, a primer providing a clear and concise step to guide through the 8 basic phases or passages during one's life cycle, including pre-birth, birth, childhood, pre-adolescence, adolescence, adulthood, middle age, and old age transition back into the ancestral realm. His newest book, Why I Became an African Chief, provides a transformation template with spiritual strategies for those seeking a life of purpose and significant achievement. I'm living testimony to that. Finally, in addition to helping expand the positive impact of charter schools, improving Atankwa's infrastructure, health and education, and numerous civic commitments at home and abroad, Nana is currently working on Reflections in a Black Man's Transformation, a sequel to David Walker's Appeal, and a book regarding what traditional governance can offer African Americans. He's an awesome brother. I don't know what I would do without him. He is the chief. Nana is the chief of the Power Networking Conference, is highly reviled, not reviled, there's lots of reverence around him, right? I'll get my R's right. I may be intimidated by him sitting there and watching me, but I love him. As I said, I don't know what I would do without him. And I want to introduce you to, if you do not know, Dr. Qua David Whitaker. Dr. Whitaker, David, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much, so much, so much. As I'm listening to you give that very humbling introduction, I'm reminded that one of the best things my father ever did, and sometimes it's hard for me to find good things that I think he did, but one of the best things he ever did was to introduce me to you.
Wow.
And so I thank him for that every day, even as I ignore the little hardships and hiccups we had all through my life. But the one good thing he did, I know for sure, is to introduce me to George Fraser. You were 18, I was 19.
That's right. So it's actually more than 50 years, 55.
We've been at this and with each other ever since.
Yeah.
So I am so grateful and so thankful and humbled by that introduction. So I've been ready for this for about 2 weeks. So I've been waiting on the edge of my chair to get to this day. So I have much more to say than I have time to say it. So let me get right to it. I learned a couple of shows ago, I learned that I should tell my signature story. So let me do that first.
That's right. And take your time. Take your time. We will give this whatever time it needs.
Okay. Well, here's my signature story. You've given my birth date, so everybody knows that. I was born at, I think it was 8 a.m., even though that says 9 a.m. You said 9 a.m., but I think it was 8. But anyway, it was on a Thursday, which is very important because my name, Qua, means a male person born on Thursday. So if people are wondering why the invaders and the slave traders took people's names away, because your name is the barcode for the human being. So if they know your name, they know all these things about you. So my name, literally translated, means a male person born on Thursday. Qua David. So I was born Thursday, November 18th, 1943. So my grandmother was born in 1900. So it was always easy for us to know how old she was, because whatever year it was, that's how old she was. So I was born in her house at 377 White Street in Auburn, Alabama, just walking distance from the University of Auburn. So I was born in a house in an aluminum tub that we used to take baths in. But every summer we would go from Cleveland to visit her, and I was born during the Jim Crow era. So I remember black and white water fountains, restrooms, and she was a very strange woman to me because she was a seamstress, and I would go with her when I went to visit, my brothers and I. We would go to the main town square, downtown, which we would call it. And she had, at that time, for those that don't know, there was a social accepted practice that if you met white people on the sidewalk walking towards you, you would have to vacate the sidewalk and allow them to have the entire walk space. And then after they passed, you would get back on the sidewalk or back on the walkway and you would keep going. Those were the rules. But she never followed those rules. And she would stop people that she didn't know because she was a seamstress, and she might stop them and say, George, you know, that lapel that's in your pocket is not really in there just right. Or she would stop another person and say, you know, honey, you don't wear plaids and stripes together. Or she'd tell a woman that she didn't know that the hem on her dress wasn't really even all the way around. And this puzzled me because I could never understand where she mustered up the courage to talk to these people like this in the time that we were living. So when I was about 21, she was 65 at the time, I asked her, her name was Susie, and she always called me David Jr. because fathers named their sons after them, which is a whole nother cultural thing that we have carried from Africa that we might have forgotten. But I said, Grandma, how do you figure out what allows you to talk to these people like this? Because you don't know these people. These people could do all kinds of things to you. And she said, well, David Jr., you know what? I'm 65 years old. And at this point in my life, I'm not looking for any new friends. And I'm not looking for a job. So when I meet people, I'm free to say anything I want to say. And if they like it, they like it. If they don't like it, they don't like it. But I don't have any obligation to tailor what I'm saying to other people. So I always say to people after I tell that story now, at this point, I'm 12 years older than my grandmother when she told me that story. I never understood what she really meant until you get to be older. So as I'm sitting here talking to you and whoever is tuning in, I'm 76. I'm not looking for any new friends. And I'm not interviewing for a job. So whatever I say, if you don't like it, I don't care. There's nothing that I'm interested in doing other than trying to be helpful. So if I say something that you don't like or you find a little bit offensive, don't think I'm gonna lose sleep over it. I'm just gonna tell you the truth about the things that I've learned over this journey. So that's my signature story. So I have watched all of the interviews and the podcasts from other people. And here's what I've learned from watching all of those. All the people that have been on, for the most part, are all entrepreneurs. And they've all figured out on their journey through the arduous times, the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys, they've found their purpose. And they have figured out how to master the path, and they've figured out their purpose, and now they're happy because if you know your purpose, then you can live here or anywhere and work at that thing, and you'll be happy because you're good at it, you like it, other people know you're good at it, and so that becomes a common thread. And rites of passage is all focused on purpose. That's what it's really focused on. So that's what I found common with all the people, including myself. If I have time, I'll tell you the second story of my grandmother that relates to this, but I'll move on. Now, one of our revered elders that's now an ancestor, John Henry Clark, made the following statement. What a people do for themselves depends upon what they think about themselves. I've added to that by saying what people do for themselves depends on what they think about themselves, and what they think about themselves depends on what they've been taught about themselves. Mm. And we've been taught some ugly stories about ourselves, and those stories that we've adopted consciously and subconsciously are part of why we don't do for ourselves. So there's another statement I want to make that's attributed to Mark Twain, but it's so apropos that I'll mention it anyway. Mark Twain said, the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you figure out why. Mm-hmm. So why we were born becomes a very, very important thing to all of us. So let me give a definition of rites. Rites of passage, by definition, are those rituals and ceremonies that enable an individual or a member of a group to come to know who they are, where they're going, and why they're going there, as they move from one clearly defined state of existence to another. Hmm. So if you're in grade school, you go to middle school. If you're in middle school, you go to high school. You have this job and you leave and you go to another place. All these are transitions that create a new station in life. If you're single and you get married, now that's a whole different thing. If you're married and you have children, now that creates a whole nother dynamic that you have to adjust to. So that's what rites of passage is. So if we were growing up in a village, I want to give you now and everybody that's watching the anchor mythological story of rites of passage. Every great movement, every great institution has its creation story that everybody, if you adopt that story, you can live by it. So if we were growing up in an Akan village, not today, but as the young people say, back in the day, we would know this story. The story goes like this. It says, of all the things on earth, the people are the only things here that have had the opportunity to leave heaven. And so just think about what that's saying. People are the only things on earth that have had the opportunity to leave heaven. And before leaving heaven, we all had, our spirits all had a private conversation with God. Because we could look down on earth and see that there was things that needed to be done and we could do those things. And all we needed to do is get permission to leave to go do those things. So we sat down with God. This was long before there was computers and tape recorders and everything. So we had to do something that we have a hard time doing today, and that is listen. So we asked her if we could get permission to leave heaven and go to earth and do our thing, because we knew we had the skill, the expertise, the insight to solve a problem that we could see. And so she told us to come back, she'd have to think about it. So sometime later we went back and sat down with God again and wanted to get an update on what was happening. And he advised us that he had considered it, and it seemed logical, and we were given permission to leave. So we all left, our spirits all left heaven to come here. Now the journey from heaven to earth is a long way. So there's a lot of things to see on the way. So we stopped and we looked at this and we looked at that and we looked at this and we looked at that. And there were things that, lots of sights and sounds. So we listened to this and we listened to that and we listened to this. Well, when we were about 9 months away from earth, we realized that you can't be on earth without a body. So we started the process to fashion the body that we would need to do the job that we knew we needed to do, and we knew what it was going to require. So we spent the last 9 months fashioning our body so that we would have the perfect body to do the job that we know we need to do. Now the irony to me is, since we fashioned a perfect body, once we got here, now we're not satisfied with that body. We want to look like somebody else. We want to do something else, but you fashioned the perfect body for the job that you said you wanted to do. So now you look around, you say, well, this body looks a little bit better than mine. So I think I should do that. I think I should work out. I think I should do all these things. But you had the perfect body that you wanted at first, but that's a story for another day. So once we arrived, we experienced the predictable problem. We realized that we spent so much time in our journey looking at one thing or another and listening to one thing or another, making our body so that when we actually arrived, we could not remember why we came here. So here we are, trying to figure out what we're doing here. Why does the life we're living seem so unfulfilling to us? Why do we ask ourselves, is this all there is to life? And we want to be like other people, but we have a job to do that we said we wanted to get permission to go do it. So now most of us are not on that job. We're trying to do other things. So that means the job that we came here to do, no one is doing that job, because we're all trying to be like Mike, or trying to be like Beyonce, or trying to be like this person or that person. So nobody's doing the work that we actually came here to do. So that work is not getting done. So rites of passage is designed to help us to answer 4 basic questions. Question 1, who am I? We look in the mirror and we say, who is this person? What is this person about really? That's question number one. Question number two, how did I become the person that I am? A lot of people think they just are what they are, but there's so forces and factors and experiences that are shaping and molding us every single day. So we're actually a creation of our experiences to a large extent too. So we have to ask ourselves, how did I come to be like this? Then we have to ask ourselves question three, because after a while we spend so much time creating stories about ourselves and pretending that we're one thing and we're as opposed to another. So we have to ask ourselves, am I really who I think I am? We tell the people that's bill collectors that we're not home. We tell the boss at the job that we couldn't get to it because this happened, that happened. So we spend so much time putting on these different masks all day long, 24/7. We don't even know whether that's us or that's someone else. We're just pretending to be this person. And ultimately, question four is, am I all that I ought to be? Because we all have a purpose. We all should be doing something. We all should be making a significant contribution to this world, and the world is waiting for our gifts. So if we don't deliver them, the world has to wait for the next incarnation or the next person to come along that has a similar task before that task is done. So that's the basic story of rites of passage. It's all related to purpose. So you've mentioned that the 3 phases already. I mean, you've mentioned the 8 transitions or periods or passages that people go through. And we all go through those passages. Some we go quickly, some we go more slowly. Many people have difficulty because we try to drag old problems into new passages where they really don't belong. Mm. So if you have a young man that's 30 years old and he's living in his same room in his mama's house and he has 2 children, you know that there's something wrong with that picture. Because you're supposed to be out in your own place as an adult doing what adults do, as opposed to being in your mother's house, living in the attic or living in the same room that you grew up in, and you have 2 children of your own. So this whole process is broken down. So rites is the process that's designed to help bring awareness to an individual, what their purpose is on this planet. What did you come here to do? And you have to get yourself prepared to do that. Just because you know what you have to do doesn't mean you're ready to do it. So you have to develop yourself to a point where you can actually perform and deliver the gift that you came here to deliver to the world. So that's the quick overview. And maybe that's where I'll stop, George, because I have some other things I would like to contribute, but if let you have some things you want to ask me.
Yeah.
Let me leave that intro right there.
Yeah. As you know, we birthed Fraser Nation at the Power Networking Conference, June 27th of last year in Houston, Texas. So the question is, can a rites of passage process help the development of Fraser Nation? And if so, how can it be done? And then let's, or you, unpack what we plan to reveal at the Power Networking Conference, October 14th to the 17th in Houston, Texas, as it relates to a rites of passage program.
Well, there's no question, a rites of passage process, a transformational or transformative process for our people is essential because we are a damaged people. We're a damaged people in the sense that almost everything we think about consciously, not to mention all the things that go on subconsciously, are filtered through a lens of a slavery experience or an oppressed experience. So we don't have the freedom to describe and think about ourselves like we think we do, because everything that we perceive and internalize is filtered through this slave experience, discrimination, Jim Crow, whatever you want to call it, racism and white supremacy. So that dictates how we think about things. So we have to be retaught and come to understand who we really are if we're going to do something meaningful. So in Fraser Nation, for example, Fraser Nation wants to have citizens that are free people. Well, you can't have citizens that are free people if they have a slave-oriented mind. So our minds have to be trained to think differently. Most of our problems would be solved in 24 hours if we thought differently, because we would just do something that's different. We thought more critically, we could do things. Now, there's some misconceptions that our people have too, I want to clear up. One misconception we have that's really prevalent, I hear it in the news with the George Floyd case, and you hear it all the time. It says, Black culture. We have our culture that's different from American culture. Well, the truth is that as Black people here, we don't have any culture at all. We live in a societal arrangement. We don't have a culture. What people are describing or referring to when they say culture, they're talking about forms of dress, music, language, and body language, and our style. Well, that's an aspect of culture, but that's not culture. That's an expression of culture. Culture has 4 basic functions. And when I give the functions, everybody should know we don't have that. The first function of a culture is to teach people how to interpret reality so that you can look around and you know what's going on. We don't have that. Second thing is culture determines standards of behavior. So if you have a culture, everybody knows how to behave, what to do, what not to do, and everybody conforms to the culture because it's the glue that holds the culture together. So one of our biggest problems is everybody just wants to do their own thing. You don't do that if there's a culture. You do what follows the rules. So that's the second aspect of culture. The third aspect is rites of passage, which is to communicate the information about item 1 and item 2 to the next generation. Because you don't have a nation, you don't have a village, you don't have a community if no one is taking time to develop and inculcate the next generation with the information that's going to be needed to sustain that culture. And fourth, a culture has to figure out how it's going to maintain itself, provide for itself, and protect itself. So as Black people in the United States, if anybody thinks we have that, I would be happy for them to email me and explain where it is. We don't have that. So there's the other misnomer, or it's not a misnomer as much as it is a diagnostic example and a prescription. The phrase of, it takes a village to raise a child. That's an African proverb based on the experience that the children that are around, everybody that comes in contact with them has to be responsible enough to help guide them, because that's the way that they will become mature and develop. So it's going to take all of the village to raise that one child. So if we understand that and we believe that, and we say to ourselves, where are our villages? If you realize you don't have any villages, then it shouldn't be a mystery to you as to why you can't raise and develop these young people and why they're out of control. Because if it takes a village to raise them and you don't have any villages, then it's obvious that they're not being guided properly. So they're doing whatever they think they should do. So those are 2 things. Now, one of my complaints, well, not a complaint, but a kind of an irony about the Fraser Net, the Power Networking Conference, has always puzzled me. I said, well, this is kind of interesting. We bring thousands of people together to network with each other, but none of the people know what their purposes are. So they don't even know if they're networking with people that they should be networking with, or they know what they're doing. So now you got the blind leading the blind, and they're walking down the memory lane or the yellow brick road hand in hand, but neither one of them knows what their purposes are or what they're doing. They're just having fun networking. So it would be much more effective if the people knew what they were about, really. Like, you know what you're about. So since you know what you're about, Brother Bedford knows what he's about. You know immediately when you meet a person whether they are going to be an assistance to you or they're a distraction to you, because you know what you're about. So you can save a lot of time. You don't get duped. People don't get in bed with you to do business that you say, well, they ain't even about what I'm about. Because you can recognize that immediately because you know what you're about. So if everybody knows what they're about, it's easy to figure out who to network with. As a matter of fact, this is so easy because the people that are aligned with you are looking for you and you're looking for them. So it's a magnetic aspect to it, that the things you need are just going to come right to you because they're looking for you. So as soon as you become clear on what you're doing, everything you need is going to be finding its way to you, because now you are fully aware of what your job is, and the universe is needing that job to be done. So all the resources that you need are going to find their way to you. So that's what the nation needs, in my estimation. It needs to have a culture, and a culture has certain functions. And if you don't have those functions, you don't have a culture. You have certain elements of a culture, but you don't have culture. And in the US, now the Jewish community has a culture, because all these things I talked about, they do. Jamaicans have a culture. The Chinese have a culture, because they do all these components. Where we live, these components are not done. They certainly aren't done by us. And they aren't supported by the government, which that wouldn't make any sense for the government, because it would only make us stronger and more capable. And then we would become a problem to the machinery that's trying to use us for its benefit and its purposes. So unless we do this ourselves, like you say all the time, nobody's going to save us but us. So if we don't do these things, they're not going to happen, because nobody is interested in us, including us half the time. So that's how rights could really be beneficial to Fraser Nation, in my opinion.
You mentioned during that dialogue, white supremacy.
Right.
The popular phrase going around right now is white privilege.
Right.
Is there a difference? Is white privilege just a softer way of saying white supremacy? Or are they two different things in your opinion?
Well, white privilege is a subset of white supremacy. But I'm glad you mentioned that, because we are also misusing another term that has become popular to say, racism. What people are talking about in contemporary language right now, they're not talking about racism. They're talking about intense prejudice. They're not talking about racism. They're talking about prejudice. Oh, you said something, and that's a prejudice. You're judging me. You're prejudging me before you even know me. That's prejudice. You don't like me because of the color of my skin. That's prejudice, because you don't know me. So how could you not like me just because I have a different skin color? But racism is a different thing. Racism is bias plus power to impact negatively the person or the group to which you have a bias against. So Black people don't have enough power to be racist, because we can't make white people do anything. We can't redline their community so they can't live where they want to live. We can't tell them they can't rent an apartment because we don't like them. We can't fire them first because we don't like who they are. We can't tell them they can't have a TV show because we don't like the cast that you have in mind. We don't have any power to do anything, but they have the power to do things. So they can take their racial prejudice or their bias and they can add influence to it to impact us negatively. So racism has two components. Bias, we all have our biases. We can say, I don't like people that wear plaid shirts. That's up to you, but that doesn't stop them from wearing a plaid shirt. But if a white person didn't like you wearing that jacket, they could pass a law that says that jacket is illegal. Then you can't wear that jacket. Or if you wear that jacket, you can be arrested by the police for violating the black jacket regulation that was just passed in 2020. So didn't you know that? And ignorance of the law is not an excuse. So you could be hauled off, your jacket taken from you because it's illegal. You say, well, I didn't know it was illegal. It was legal up until yesterday. Well, the law was just passed yesterday. So now you're in violation. So come on, Mr. Fraser, we don't want to hurt you. Dr. Fraser, we don't want to hurt you, but you got to take that jacket off. Then you get in the paddy wagon, we put the cuffs on you, and you'll be arraigned tomorrow morning. See, black people can't do that. White people make up rules that are designed to punish us because they know our behavior. So we're going to be entrapped by our own tendencies because they have the power to make a rule that says we can't do things that they know we're going to do. That's racism, or synonymous with white supremacy. White privilege is the benefit that white people get from that racist structure that most of them don't even know they have. Like the chick that was in Central Park the other day, she knows she has that. She was trying to use it. And her cell phone might as well have been a 9mm gun, because she knows if the police come and she's acting up on that phone, it's likely that they're going to come with their guns out and they're going to recognize this black man who's a bird watcher, but they're going to interpret that binoculars as some kind of weapon, and they'll shoot him first and then say, ma'am, is this the guy? So she knows that when she's doing it. So she's taking advantage of her white privilege to be able to call the police, and she knows that they will come and believe her. And the dog will be on a leash by then, and she'll lie and say the dog was always on the leash. That's what she'll do.
Right.
She's using her privilege. A black woman couldn't make that phone call on a white bird watcher because it wouldn't work. You don't have that privilege.
Right.
It's the same thing, but that won't fly for you. They say, ma'am, are you sure it's a white man? Well, we got a lot of things to do right now, so we'll get over there as soon as we can. No, but he's threatening me right now. They wouldn't come. That story wouldn't work. So she wouldn't have that privilege. The Collins woman had that privilege, and she knew she had it, but they weren't listening to her at first, if you remember the tape. So she had to dramatize it.
Right.
They weren't buying it.
Right.
She had to dramatize it to get the privilege to really work. She had the ticket, but the ticket wasn't going into the machine right, so it wasn't activating the machine. So she had to embellish on the story. So that's the difference. So our people need to understand the difference between racism, prejudice, or bias, even if the bias is real intense. Where you say, I really hate you, but that doesn't stop that person from doing anything. You can't pass a law that says, I hate Brother Bedford, so I want you to pass a law so he can't do a podcast again. See, we can't do that. But if somebody white said they hate Bedford and they didn't want him to do a podcast, it's a good chance they know people in high places that could prevent him from doing a podcast. That's racism.
Mm-hmm.
So,
you were installed as a chief in Ghana in 2004, and you've traveled to Africa over 60 times since 1995. Right. What is the one key thing that you've learned about the similarities and the differences between Ghanaians and African Americans?
This is a very important question and at a very important time, because we're at a time now where we may have an opportunity in front of us with COVID and with George Floyd that's presented to us. Sometimes I think that George Floyd is almost a divine intervention into our lives because it's presented an opportunity that has never happened before. And no one would have ever been willing to bet any money on the possibility that something could happen that would upstage COVID-19 that currently has the global economy shut down and all the people in the world are locked up in their houses. No one would bet that anything could happen that would upstage those circumstances, but that's what's occurred. So that's like a godly intervention into this situation. Nobody could set that up. But here's what I've learned from the similarities and the differences that would be helpful to all of us in the diaspora and all the continental Africans. It's not just Ghana, it will be everywhere else too, is that we are both suffering from mental illness. Our mental illness has been brought on by an experience that we refer to as slavery, that has affected our great, 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 great grandparents. In every generation, that impact of that slave experience has been passed down to every succeeding generation by some phrases, some caution, some things, because our forebears came to understand firsthand how evil and diabolical these people can be. So they would have, if they had Brother Bedford as a child, they would say, now these are the things you have to look out for. Because if you don't, you could get hung. You could get killed easily. So this is what you have to do. This is how you have to conduct yourself. When you get around certain people, you can't look them in the face. When you get around certain people, you have to be humble. When you get around certain people, you have to keep your head down because these people are vicious. So Brother Bedford has his child and his son, he tells his son the same thing. And it comes down. So part of our problem is we are suffering from what I call post and ongoing traumatic stress disorder. This hasn't stopped. This has been going on for 400 years. Ghanaians, on the other hand, they are suffering a mental illness brought on by colonialism. The thing we share is we don't understand colonialism and they don't understand slavery. And we tell them that slavery was worse than colonialism. And they say, well, you sold us. No, we say you sold us into slavery. Your people sold us into slavery. So I hate you because you're the descendant of people that sold us into slavery. And they're saying, well, colonialism was no walk in the park now. You actually had it better than us because nobody came into your village and killed your chief and killed your queen mother and killed all the royal family and drugged them out and drugged them through the street. And then they came in and took over your village and made you work. See, you didn't have that experience. They just took you. We had to witness them killing everybody that we love in front of us and then dominated us. So we have this ongoing debate about who was punished the most. And in reality, we are relatives. We are the children of the ancestors. They are the children of the ancestors. So most of these people are in the same family that we're in. We just don't know that. So that's the barrier that has to be overcome. We think that Africans don't like us. And Africans tell us that what they were taught in school, that, see, African people, one thing that African people do is to migrate. African people leave and go places. African people do not have any problem traveling. And so because if they did, they wouldn't have populated the whole world. So African people been all over this planet. So the one thing, so African people go to hunt. They go to get things all the time. What doesn't happen that often is they don't come back. So in school, they were taught that their ancestors left them to go get work. And they went to America and became rich and never looked back to help you out. So they abandon you once they struck it rich. Here they are in Hollywood. Here they are with gold chains. And they should have been sending you some money back here because that's what the culture would demand. So they were taught in school that your people left you and they made it out. They made out and they just forgot about you. So that's what they've been told. We've been told that they sold us into slavery. So now we have these two erroneous things that happened on occasion, but they weren't the general rule. So that's a bridge that we have to come across. Mm. So I'm trying to, when I go there, I try to teach people and say, well, you had your bad experience. I had my bad experience, but they both bad. So why are we going to talk about two things that were both bad and neither one of us did those things? Why don't we just accept that mine was bad enough and yours was bad enough? I wouldn't wish mine on you and you wouldn't wish yours on me. So we can get past that. We weren't the perpetrators of either one of those. So, but that's what had to overcome. Now, what could we accomplish if we could overcome that? African people are spiritually rich and materially poor. We are materially rich and spiritually poor. We don't believe in the things that we say we believe in because when the time comes, we don't use those things. I have some friends that every time something happens to them, they're churchgoers, regular churchgoers. But when something happens to them, they call me. I say, why are you calling me? Because I'm not a Christian. I don't go to church. I practice traditional spirituality. So I said, why are you calling me? Well, you know about these things. I said, but in a case like this, you have God. So if the things that you believe in don't help you in a situation like this, don't you know that tells you you're not that confident in that thing? You're more confident in me, but I don't practice that same thing. So if you don't practice or rely upon the thing that you say you believe in when you really need it, it should communicate something to you that's a flaw in what you're doing. So maybe you're doing that for entertainment, which is okay, but don't say you believe it, because when you believe it, you use it. Especially when you need it, you use it. So that's the biggest obstacle that I see. But people are coming around, and we're all changing because we're waking up, they're waking up, and we are beginning to realize that we need each other. It's not like we could use each other. It would be nice. We're recognizing that we need each other.
Right. How do you view COVID-19 and the whole George Floyd thing and their relation to African Americans? And what are the three major messages you feel are important for our people?
Let me think. Well, one thing is for sure. Why it's happened, I don't know. I consider it to be a divine intervention. George Floyd, even though there have been prior instances of basically the same thing, we all know that there's something different about this. It has captivated the attention of the entire world.
Why do you think that is?
It has to be some divine spiritual energy that's being moved. Because why would people in Australia be demonstrating? Yeah. They don't know George Floyd. They don't know any of these things. It's not something on their news networks that they pay attention to. Or people in Italy, Germany.
Or why are the Amish protesting? I mean, when is the last time you heard of that?
I never heard of Amish.
They don't have televisions. They don't read newspapers. I mean, but they are protesting.
They are what we call literally off the grid. So where would they even know about this? Cell phones, perhaps, but who knows? So I can only attribute this to something that's bigger, that's happening, that provides an opportunity for us as Black people. It's kind of a wake-up call to some reality that if we were astute enough and realize here's an opportunity for us to get together so we can get ahead. Everybody else is running to their own houses now. Every country is thinking about its own place. And we are a country within a country that's just not organized. The Chinese are a country inside of a country that is organized, and they all live in Chinatowns. They're a country inside of a country that's organized like the home country that they come from, as best they can do it. So they're not running for political office. They're not doing campaign speeches because they don't really need that, because they have the culture. They have their actual culture to support them. And if they observe it and function in accordance with the culture, they have what they need. They don't need to have mayors. They don't need to have people in Congress. They can do what they want to do because they have their culture and is cohesive. Mm-hmm. So this is an opportunity for us to figure out how can we become unified, free, and make progress. We have an opportunity to do that. Now, if we blow it, it's just on us. This is an opportunity. Nobody's moving. If we was, instead of, I hope our people are not sitting watching TV all day right now. We should be thinking, planning, strategizing as to where we're going to go when the door is open, because we have time to do that. We don't have distractions. So we could come out of this hitting the ground running with whatever we're going to do, as opposed to just running around aimlessly. So some of the demonstrations are just pent up energy that's being released. There's not much direction and order to what's happening. Unless it's a secret plan. If it's a secret plan, it's really being camouflaged very well, because I can't get an idea of what it is.
Yeah.
But people are letting off energy. They're upset, and I understand that. But somebody has to, like people like us, we have to try to bring some order, direction, and logic to what is happening. Where are we going to go after we finish doing these things? What are we going to do then?
Right.
So there has to be something that's going to guide us. But the opportunity is there. So half of what we've always said as Black people, we just want an opportunity. I don't want a handout. I just want an opportunity. Well, we have a huge opportunity right now. To say, now let's regroup, let's think, who knows what, who has some direction, what kind of plan can we come up with that we can all agree on? Even if I don't agree with 100% of it, I'm willing to do it because it's better than what I can come up with on my own. And John Henry Clark said, Black people are powerful enough. If we agreed on anything, even if it was wrong, it would change the world. Even if we agreed on the wrong thing and all did it, it would change the world.
Right.
It wouldn't even have to be the right thing. It could be anything.
Right.
What did the head of the FBI say? Hoover? The most frightening thing to him,
right,
the biggest threat to the United States is the potential unity of the Negro. Even if they don't know what they're doing, if they just become unified and have no idea what they're doing, that's the threat. So that should inform our people why many of our leaders are harmed or assassinated, because the potential of unity is so threatening to these people that they go off. Mm-hmm. Because if we became unified, the game would be over. that they're playing. The game will be over. Just on our unity, the game is over, because we say we're just not going to do that anymore.
Right. One final question, Doc. What, if any, signs do you see that may bode well for Black people in America and around the world?
Well, it's an extrapolation, actually, of the point we were just talking about. There's something powerful that's been happening on the African continent that most of our people don't know about. The African continent has 54 countries right now. And most people don't know this either. At the time of the enslavement of our people, the captivity and forced migration of our people, there was no Africa like we know Africa today. These nation states didn't come into existence until the Berlin Conference in 1885. Before that, Africa was just one huge land space and people were living on it. If you were 10 miles apart from another village, you didn't even know that village was on the planet because you didn't go that far. So all of these nation states now have been created by former colonizers. And the former colonizers, because we don't understand that Europeans never liked each other. We think that there's no such thing as white on white crime. But if you follow the history, the Europeans never liked each other. So they were fighting with each other all the time.
Brutal wars.
Brutal wars. After Columbus sailed, they had fights in the Caribbean. They're fighting with each other on those little islands. So they never liked each other. In a certain way, I believe that we have saved them from killing each other because they can all agree that they don't like us. So if they focus on their hatred to us, they can avoid what they feel about each other. But if you look at the European Union now, Britain wants out. They say we can't take this. We can't take this any longer. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be with you guys. But all the guys are their own people, so they don't like each other. So that's something we have to understand. They don't like each other, and we are the antidote for their self-destruction because they all agree that they don't like us, so they can focus on us. So what the colonizers did, since they didn't like each other, they created trade routes on the African continent so that it would benefit their colonial nations. So, which interfered with African nations being able to trade with each other, because you could only trade by using a certain route. So even though your next door country, Ghana and Nigeria, you can't trade with Nigeria, it's your next door neighbor, because Nigerian trade has to go to a certain place in a certain way, and then it comes back from there to you. So if I make a phone call in Ghana right now to Brother Bedford, my call has to be routed through Great Britain, and then it goes to Brother Bedford. In Senegal, if you want to make a call or you want to take money out of a bank, it has to go to France. Everything has to go to France to be given the okay, and then you can do what you want to do. So the African nations there's been a clamor for years and years and years to dismantle this impediment. And the African nations now have come to a conclusion that if we could understand the significance of it, it would change the game by next week. All these 54 nations that are members of the African Union have come to the conclusion that Africa cannot make progress without the diaspora, mainly African Americans. Mm-hmm. They know that we're the most educated, the most skilled, the wealthiest of any African group anywhere on earth. And if they had our expertise joined to their mineral resources their other resources, their assets, their labor, we could change the game in 6 months to a year. Because if you take, like the Lakers, if you take Anthony Davis off of New Orleans and put him on your team, New Orleans is weakened and you're stronger. This is not a mystery. So they know they need us. And if we could understand that we need them, because there's much more opportunity for people in America, Black people here, on the African continent than there is here. And you don't
They need everything. They need
everything.
Everything, right.
They have everything. Every opportunity you want is available. If you could just get out of your mind that they sold us into slavery. No, they didn't. The people that are there right now don't know anything about that. And the people that did that before, initially, they didn't even know what was happening.
That's right.
Some people eventually figured out and they were greedy and corrupt. But it's not like we don't have greedy and corrupt people right here. And a whole bunch of them that's holding us back happen to be Black people that look just like us. So it's the same thing. So we don't need to make an issue out of that. But the opportunity is there for us to join forces at a time where we have a total of 1.5 billion people. I tell people in the US all the time and say, you know, you're a school teacher. You could go to Ghana right now and become a famous teacher. Yeah, but I'd have to do this. You wouldn't have to do anything. You could teach just on what you know right now. What you know, you have no idea of how important that is. The information that you just have in your head that you could go teach people because they don't have that information. So you become, what's the proverb? A one-eyed man is king in the land of the blind.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't know how capable you are in a different location because you're thinking about the challenges you have here. Now, here's the real irony, the real big difference that people wouldn't know. The biggest problem in the US right now, a person would think, is the police. If somebody came from another planet right now, they would think the biggest problem in America is the police. But you can go to Ghana right now. You could spend 6 months there and you might not see 10 police officers.
Mm.
The chance of you getting hurt by a policeman is 0. 0. As a matter of fact, African people say, and this is hard for us to understand, African people say, the mere presence of police in a community tells you that there's something wrong with the structure. People should be able to manage themselves. You don't need police. So you can go to a soccer game in Ghana where there might be 15,000 people. There's only 2 police in the whole place. And they're only there in case somebody got sick and they could take them to EMS. They're not there to manage the crowd. So the mere fact that you could think about being in an environment where the whole discussion we're having about police doesn't exist. So what will we talk about then? There'd be no George Floyd because the police don't kill people. Matter of fact, you don't even see the police. You never see the police. And you can in Ghana, I can argue with the police. The police could stop me and I say, why are you stopping me? I'm really in a hurry. Well, you were speeding. No, I wasn't. Why are you really stopping me? Because I got some place to go. So I really don't have time to just sit here and talk with you. And if it doesn't go well, you could drive off from the police. Nobody's going to chase you. There's not going to be any siren that comes to stop you, pulls you over, pulls you out of the car, drags you, beats you up, take you someplace. It's not going to happen. Because in a culture, the people know the rules of behavior. And anybody can tell you, well, George, you really can't do that. You can't do that because that won't work. And if you do it, you're going to embarrass the whole family. And then everybody's going to know about it. And then the chief is going to call us and wonder why we aren't teaching George better manners.
Right.
And so it's just going to be a big, big problem. So you really can't do that thing because you will destroy our entire family name. So everybody knows the rules. You follow the rules because even the children know the rules. So we're in a different place. And so if we had culture, we would know the rules.
Brother Bedford, we went over, but I knew we would. Any questions, any burning questions, anything that you want to ask Dr. Whitaker? And then we'll wrap this up.
Yes, there is something I would like to ask Dr. Whitaker to speak to. First, thank you, Dr. Whitaker. You've said so many profound things tonight for us to think on, in particular, the part about George Floyd and the divine intervention, you know, how God uses tragedy to have us focusing on something at a particular time. So I think that's profound and really something that we should think deeply on. But what I would like you to speak to real quick is, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, we've touched on it a couple of times, but the rites of passage, being here in America, you just talked about the Wild Wild West and the lawlessness that's over here in the Wild Wild West. And it's unfortunate, but for the majority of Black men that I've encountered, and even women, but speaking to the issue of Black men, most of us don't even enter into a rites of passage until we're in prison, right? You know, in fact, prison has become the new rites of passage for us here in America. So I want you to, how can we, most of us don't even, how do you speak to, how do we have the rites of passage ingrained in our communities before we have to wait till we're 27 and 30 years old, living in mama's house with 2 children, before someone pulls our coattails and say, that's not the way to do it?
Well, if we see our people, it's a challenging thing because part of the disorientation of our people has also been accompanied by the reality that most of our people consider their opinions to be expert diagnostic results of some research. So they think whatever they say makes sense. So our people are frequently not willing to listen. So it's hard to get them to see that, you know, there's a way to do things. There's a process by which things are done. Everything operates by some kind of process. Birth is a process. Growing up is a process. Developing yourself is a process. You can't just say you want to do something and all of a sudden you're able to do that. It doesn't work like that. There's a process. So our people don't want to go through a process of any kind. Our people want to wake up in the morning and immediately have a thought and become a CEO of some company by noon without doing anything. Well, nothing happens like that. So, but if we, in Fraser Nation, so if you want to be a member of something, now you have a reason to do the things that are required. Because you want to be, like if you want to be a Blood or a Crip, you got to do the things that you have to do to become a member. So the people do those things, even whether we agree with them or not, but it becomes kind of a cultural community. They have their rules, they follow their rules, even if it's against society, but they follow their rules. Primarily because society hasn't given them any other rules. You haven't provided any process, so they go for some other process. But we could do it. It would just take some organizing, and we are going to introduce at Fraser Nation this year the rights process that people could get involved in. The best way I think we could do it expeditiously now is through the process that's frequently referred to as train the trainers. So if you had 25 people that came from 25 cities that got training, let's say they were all church members, young church members, 20 to 35, that they were prominent in the church. People liked them already. They looked up to them. Well, we could train them to do the rights. And then that immediately after that, 25 different cells would be started in 25 places, almost immediately. They may not do it the way with the effectiveness that I would, but you could get something started. You say, all you have to do is these 10 things, just master those 10 things. So now you have 25 cells operating in short order. And you do that again with 25 new people. Now you have 50 cells. So you could do this if it was organized, and Fraser Nation is organized, so you could certainly structure it, and we know what we're doing. So we could do this fairly quickly, actually. I've now, in 30 years of doing this at Kent State University and West Virginia University, I've probably taken 400 or 500 students through this process. So it could be done.
Right.
Nothing is beyond our capacity to do it. It's just having this expertise and scaling it so that it can be done effectively. So yes, we can do this with no trouble.
Yeah. Dr. Fraser, we did have one more question. Do you think we want to try to get it in? It's from Linda.
Sure.
Yeah, we got one more question. And we want to thank everyone for being patient with us. But it seems like more and more people are coming on. So they're enjoying, they're probably happy that we're staying on a little bit later. Yeah. So Linda Clemens wants to know the power of the elders and seers' use of their spiritual gifts, the gift of knowing. Can you speak to that?
Well, this is at the heart, which I wouldn't have brought up myself, because now you're into the depth, you're into the real nuts and bolts of it. But say, for example, see, it's hard for our people to think about the possibility that we knew more things than we know right now. So it's hard for us to imagine that at an earlier time, we knew things that we don't know right now. But it shouldn't be too puzzling to us, because our grandparents know cures for things that we never heard of, and they're not at the pharmacy, and they say, well, all you got to do is take a couple of these, and you'll feel better. Everybody knows that. Right. So we know that. But when I say the rites of passage, the first question is, who am I? Now just imagine, just for the sake of discussion, and just imagine what I'm saying is true, because I've seen enough things to tell me that what I'm talking about is not imagination. So your African ancestors had the capacity, had the skill, that when a child was going to be born, they could meet with the pregnant woman, and they could communicate with the spiritual world, and they could find out what is the purpose for that child. So when that child is born, the child gets a name that identifies the child's purpose. The name that identifies the child's purpose is a name that communicates to everybody in the village what that child is here for. So everybody knows how they can help develop that child simply because they know the child's name. And they communicate with the spiritual forces to find out, why is this child coming? Because if the child is coming, we have to be prepared for the child. We need to know what the child is coming for, so we can be prepared, so we can help them. Otherwise, the child is just wandering around on the earth with no assistance. So that's the power. Now, if we could tap back into that, which is mostly power that women have, the intuitive capacity to know stuff without tangible evidence. Now, men, we compete against that. Because if we talk to a woman and she says, well, let's say, Brother Bedford or George, you meet somebody and you go home, you talk to your girlfriend or your wife, she said, I don't have a good feeling about that brother that you had over here just the other day. So why you say that? Because you don't even know him. I know that. I just saw him the other day, but I don't have a good feeling about him. So you be careful, because if you go into business with him, you could get burned. But we'll say, well, give me some. You can't just tell me you ain't feeling him. So give me some tangible information. Do you know anything about him? No. Do you know where he's worked before? No. Do you know anybody else he's been involved with? No. So how you gonna tell me you think he's not gonna be a good person to be with? And she'll say, I'm just telling you, I don't feel it. I ain't feeling it. So most women, unless they become so involved with the societal demands of paternalism. See, in America, to be a woman and be successful, oftentimes you have to become manly in order to deal with the energy that's always around you that you have to deal with. So you have to take on, adapt, and become manly in how you do things, not knowing that you're sacrificing the power that's really important, which is your intuitive nature, which is what we need. We need the intuitive nature because that's closer to the spiritual world than the way we operate. We operate with facts. Give me the facts. Tell me what, how much, when, what's it going to cost, and when is it going to be over? That's what we do. If you can't tell me those things, I'm not going to listen to you. You just tell me how you feel. But how you feel is the most important thing in terms of intuitive nature, because you're getting that feeling from this spiritual world that's around us all the time. It's not, you're not making things up. You're interpreting the things that are happening. So if we had elders that had these skills refined, we could solve problems. We could solve problems very easily because we would know more than we know now. We're problem solving in the dark most of the time. We're just guessing at something, crossing our fingers and hope it's going to work. There's an African that told me once, he said, I don't understand about African Americans. I said, what's that? He said, especially, I don't understand about religious people. I said, what do you mean? He said, we wouldn't keep worshiping a God that doesn't deliver on our prayers. We expect results. So if we're praying and praying and praying and nothing's happening, we don't keep praying to that same thing. If you say you can make it rain and 3 days go by and there's no rain, well, we stop listening to you. You can make it rain, and we know rain when we see it. So if you say you can make rain, where is it? If it's not being produced, we know you can't do it. So we move on to somebody else that can. He said, you guys seem to be praying, 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 but I don't see the results of these prayers. We wouldn't keep doing that. That's what puzzles them. Because we expect results. So if we had more people that could tap into that, or we recognized them and then we didn't say they were crazy, and we utilized that capacity, it would give us intuitive forecast about what is going on and what we need to prepare for. Like people in the South can tell you, we go to visit, for example, they tell you, well, it's going to rain. And you say, I don't see no clouds. Well, I can smell the air. I can tell that it's going to rain and it's going to come from that direction. And the skies can be just as clear because they know things that you don't know. And that's always been in our culture. And those people have typically been revered as seers, spiritual guides, spirit healers, because they can just see things that we can't see. Like George can see and use words in a way that we never would think of. That's a gift. Other people, we recognize this in athletics.
Right.
We say that LeBron is gifted.
Right.
He can do things that nobody else can do. But Brother Bedford is gifted too. And George is gifted, and I'm gifted. The question is in what way are you gifted? Because we know you're gifted. It's just trying to figure out in what manner are you gifted and how can we use that gift? So that's a good question. If we had more of that, we would be better off because we wouldn't be doing so much trial and error.
Beautiful.
Dr. Whitaker, you have established the longest podcast in the history of the All-Star podcast series.
So you haven't had Trump on yet because he would boast that he had the longest no matter what.
And we could all sit here at the feet of a master and listen literally for hours. the word I was searching for, the R word I was searching for earlier, but my brain went blank, was revered.
Revered.
That was the word I was searching for.
We knew what you were trying to say.
Right.
Yeah.
And you are very important to all that we are trying and want to be. Your guidance, your logic, your common sense, your insights, your experiences have helped to teach us all and to calm us and to inspire us. At 76, we hope and pray that you get many, many, many more years than that.
I fully expect to, and I'm going to kill you if you don't do the same thing. Do I have time? Do I have time to say two quick things?
Go right ahead. Sure.
My other story from my grandmother, and also to clear up another thing that our people are confused about, and it's part of our problem. Linda's question made me think of it. An elder is more than an old person. The problem that we're having in some respects is we got old people that expect to be revered as if they're elders. And they're just old.
Two different things.
They're just old, right? An elder is a different thing. An elder is an example of what it means to be a person of good character, that's focused on the community, has done things, has set a standard of behavior that matches the values of the culture. Because the culture produces the people. So the elders should become the best examples of what the culture produced, but because it's been under production longer. So if you get to be my age, George's age, and you're not revered, that means what have you been doing? What have you been doing all this time? So just because you are an old person, there's no reason why everybody should be giving you all this reverence. You can be respected for being old, but reverence comes to a person that has established themselves as an example of what the culture can produce if it's done its job well. So that other people will learn vicariously to mimic you, because they know they'll turn out all right if they have a role model. That's what a role model is.
Mm-hmm.
And elders are the people that become ancestors. When they pass, they become ancestors. They're the names of the people that you mention when you're pouring libation. You notice nobody mentions Uncle Bobo, the drunk that came and knocked over everything, and every time you got together, nobody calls his name. He's not an ancestor. So the ancestor is an example of an elder that lived his life, her life, to the utmost and provide an example for other people to follow. And they've done something. Harriet Tubman. That's why we mentioned Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman did something. Sojourner Truth, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. We mention their names not just because they got old. We mention their names because they did something significant that can serve as a model for others. Jesus. He did something. You don't mention people that don't do anything. So action, that's why we say action speaks louder than words. You got to do something. So the final thing that my grandmother told me, I was a professor at Kent State University, and I was having difficulty with my colleagues, all of whom were white, except for me. But I was having trouble dealing with them. And so I called her once and I said, Grandma, I'm having a lot of trouble at the university where I teach, and I just don't know what to do. So her response to me was, well, I'm not surprised that you're having trouble. And I was irritated when she said that. Because my interpretation was she's going to now tell me all the flaws that I have that would explain why I'm having trouble. And so I paused and I said, Grandma, I don't understand what you mean by that. She said, David Jr., I'm not surprised that you're having trouble on that job. She said, because nobody in your family has ever worked for anybody. You're not cut out to work for people. So if you try to do that, you're going to have trouble. And that doesn't surprise me because nobody in the history of your family has ever attempted something like that.
Right.
So, so George, most of what you're trying to do all the time is to get us to recognize the responsibility we have to be employers of our own people, to figure out what we need to do for ourselves and our people. And that, for the most part, is not getting a job with somebody else that we're building up their family, building up their community on our labor. We could use our labor much more effectively for ourselves and with ourselves. And that would be a lesson. If we could learn that, we would be well on the way to freedom, unity, and progress.
Amen.
So I just want to give a shout out to Brother Ron Williams, who mentioned me when he was on.
Mm-hmm.
I want him to know that he mentioned the one important thing about rights, that is the key element of rights, is to produce a person with good character. If we have in Fraser Nation people that have good character, the sky is the limit. The people are honest, dependable, hardworking, committed. They follow up on what they say. They do what they say they're going to do. And all we need is good character. We don't need geniuses. We need people with good character because we already know we have genius within us. It's good character. If we had good character, we'd never question anybody around us. Just like you, myself, and you and Brother Bedford. Anything that Brother Bedford says he's going to do based on what you talked about, you know 100% that unless he dies, he's going to do that thing.
Mm-hmm.
He knows the same thing. I know the same thing with you. You know the same thing with me. Because we know what the character is, so we can count on each other. So that if we could get that from our people, we could do anything.
Yeah.
We can do anything. So I'm happy to have been here and had the opportunity to have been here. And I hope that I've added a little something that might be helpful to people. If people want to get in touch with me, they can at ashe1ltd@gmail.com, or they can go on my website,
Spell Ashe. Spell Ashe.
ASHE, the number 1, LTD@gmail.com. My website is African Chief Books, all one word, .com.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dr. Whitaker will be with us at the Power Networking Conference. He starts it off. And if you want to meet him, be there. Next week is our last week.
Okay.
Dr. Whitaker was number 28. Oscar Hines will be with us on Tuesday to talk about the art of influence. Brilliant brother. And Dr. Stacy N.C. Grant, who is our mistress of ceremonies for the Power Networking Conference, will close out this spring series of our All-Star podcast. We're going to have a summer series. We're going to reduce it to twice a week, a little bit later at 8 p.m. A stellar lineup as we had for our spring season. You'll love it. You'll enjoy it. Many of the names you will know, some you won't know, but you need to know. Again, we urge you to join us at the Power Networking Conference, October the 14th through the 17th. We've got, again, 2 more nights, next Tuesday, next Thursday. There's really nothing else to say. Dr. Whitaker has said tonight what all that needs to be said. I'm just going to close, Brother Bedford, with a meme that I posted today. And as usual, Brother Bedford, thank you. As always, you are a man of character and a man of your word, and you've been awesome. It's not quite the end on this series, but I just wanted to say that one more time. So if you follow me on my social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter, I posted something today. Here it is. That I want to urge you to read. And I want to urge you to follow me on social media. I post something every single day. My whole goal in life is to train and to teach, and to serve, and to provide bits of information that will have a cumulative effect on your life over time. This is my post from today. It's got a real big response, so that's the only reason I'm reading it to you. And it says, in quotes, Martin, dead. Malcolm, dead. Where are our Black leaders, you ask? Go stand in the mirror. If you can't see one, become one. Love you. See you next Tuesday.
Thanks, Brother Bedford. George, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank everybody that was tuned in.
Amen.
Okay.